The glittering Manhattan skyline stretched beneath John Anderson's penthouse window, a view that symbolized limitless possibility. Yet tonight, as he stood alone in the silent stillness of his luxurious residence, that same panorama reminded him of the void he could not escape. John had everything the world deems valuable. He had built a technology empire from a modest California garage into a multi-billion-dollar company, and his name was synonymous with innovation. Magazines clamored for interviews. Investors flattered him daily. Philanthropists invited him to exclusive fundraisers. Behind every handshake and honorary award, however, lay a man who felt profoundly disconnected from himself. Raising a glass of water, John watched the taillights weaving through traffic far below, each beam a reflection of humanity's restless pursuit. He had chased titles, influence, and material comforts relentlessly. 3 opulent homes in New York, Malibu, and Switzerland. A private jet that carried him across continents. A collection of rare supercars that aroused envy. A meticulously curated social calendar filled with gala dinners and high society events. The applause and accolades should have been enough, yet his heart pounded with dread and emptiness. "What purpose lies beyond this dazzling facade?" he whispered into the night, his voice swallowed by the hum of distant city life. Across the room, a stack of work contracts and half-finished venture proposals lay abandoned on a marble table. Among them sat a worn, green-covered book, an English translation of the Quran. John had purchased it 3 weeks earlier on impulse and had since read its pages in secret, always under the soft glow of a bedside lamp long after his staff had departed. His fingertips traced the book's cracked spine now, as though seeking a hidden promise. What captivated him most was a single verse that seemed to echo inside his chest. "Know that only by remembering Allah do hearts find peace." Surah Ra'd 28. Heart trembling, he opened the book again and read another verse in a hushed tone. "And the life of this world is nothing but play and amusement." Surah Al-Ankabut 64. His throat constricted, and tears he had long suppressed glistened in his eyes. In that moment, John recognized that every achievement he had celebrated was fleeting, a temporary balm for a deeper thirst. He sank onto a leather sofa, chest tight, overwhelmed by the realization that his relentless pursuit had reduced him to a machine, efficient, successful, but incapable of genuine joy. In the hush of his penthouse, with the city lights flickering beyond the glass, John felt something shift within him. The path of numbers, deals, and declarations suddenly felt hollow, compared to the whisper of a sacred text. It was there, in that vulnerable pause, that John's true journey began. A journey not of boardroom conquests or social triumphs, but of the heart, guided by simple words on a page promising an inner transformation he had never known. From that authentic moment forward, nothing would ever truly be the same for John Anderson's complete inner life. John woke to a shaft of morning light streaming through his penthouse curtains, his mind still racing from the revelations that had pierced his restless thoughts the night before. Below him, Manhattan's streets pulsed with unceasing activity, a constant reminder of ambition in motion. Yet today, he felt an inexplicable tug away from boardroom battles and investor calls. Instead of opening his planner, he found himself gravitating toward the laptop on his sleek glass desk. Settling into his ergonomic chair, he opened a web browser and typed with trembling fingers, "Why do people convert to Islam?" Within moments, his screen overflowed with search results promising insights into life-altering transformations. He clicked one link and read the account of a German physicist who, intrigued by research into the miraculous properties of Zamzam water, discovered that the empirical data pointed him toward faith rather than skepticism. Absorbed, John moved on to another story, a Brazilian nun whose life changed irrevocably after encountering Surah Maryam. The narrative described how Mary's unwavering devotion and compassion had inspired profound reflection, leading her to embrace Islam as a path of surrender and service. Each description resonated as if echoing a hidden longing within John's own heart for meaning beyond material success. Driven by curiosity, John tapped the icon for a Quran app on his tablet. The elegant interface displayed original Arabic script side by side with a clear English translation. He scrolled deliberately until he reached Surah At-Tur and paused at verse 35. Were they created out of nothing, or did they create themselves? Surah At-Tur 35. That question echoed loudly in his mind. As an engineer who prided himself on designing complex systems where every component served a precise purpose, he recognized the stark contrast between orderly intention and random chance. He stared out at the Manhattan skyline, pondering whether everything, from the soaring towers to the smallest living cell, might reflect a deliberate act of creation rather than mere coincidence. Feeling both anticipation and vulnerability, John realized he needed guidance. He opened his messaging app and wrote to Ahmad, the company's Egyptian-born chief engineer known for his quiet wisdom. "Coffee at the rooftop lounge this afternoon? I have some questions." Moments later, Ahmad replied with characteristic warmth, "Absolutely. 1 o'clock works perfectly." The simplicity of that arrangement calmed John's nerves. That afternoon, John joined Ahmad on the rooftop terrace overlooking Central Park's verdant expanse. The city's roar receded as they sipped mint-infused tea and watched the breeze stir the treetops. After exchanging polite greetings, John felt the last of his hesitation melt away. He looked earnestly at Ahmad and asked, "Why do you believe in Islam?" Ahmad regarded him with compassionate clarity and answered, "When I embraced Islam, I discovered that faith is not a ritual, but a living, personal conversation with the Creator. My heart found genuine peace when I recognized a purpose beyond wealth and status. Prayer anchors me in that truth." He paused, then recited softly, "Indeed, I am Allah. There is no deity except me. So worship me and establish prayer for my remembrance." Surah Taha 14. As those words settled around him, John felt a quiet calm spread through his restless mind. In that moment, he realized that despite all his achievements and acclaim, he had never known this kind of inner stability. With the sun dipping low and city lights glimmering below, John bowed his head in silent prayer, an unspoken plea for guidance and the courage to continue on this newly opened path. The following Friday morning, John woke before sunrise. The memory of his rooftop prayer lingered like a delicate fragrance, guiding him toward an unfamiliar but inviting path. He sat by his balcony, the city still silent beneath a pale pre-dawn sky, and whispered, "God, if you hear me, show me the way." Shortly after, a message from Ahmad appeared on his phone. "Meet me at the Islamic Cultural Center Mosque at 1:00 p.m. No pressure, just come and see for yourself." The simplicity of the invitation gave John a sense of permission to explore without obligation, a gift he gratefully accepted. At the appointed time, John arrived at the mosque, its elegant arches and soft dome contrasting with Manhattan's steel and glass. As he stepped inside, the hush of the prayer hall wrapped around him like a soft cloak. Ahmad met him with a warm smile and guided him toward the back row, where John sat among men and women of diverse backgrounds, all united by a shared focus. He observed the congregants' quiet reverence, their eyes lowered, their movements measured and purposeful. The space felt different from any other place he had known. Here there were no cameras, no applause, no status. Here he was simply a seeker among many. Then the call to prayer, the adhan, began. Its melodic cadence rose and fell, each word resonating deep within his chest. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. John closed his eyes and felt the echo vibrate through his being. It was a call to tune out the world's distractions and tune into something infinitely greater than any earthly achievement. Soon after, the Imam delivered the Friday sermon. His voice was calm yet authoritative, as he spoke of guidance, compassion, and remembrance. When he recited, "Allah is the protector of the believers. He brings them out of darkness into light." Surah Al-Baqarah 257, John felt a quiet stirring in his soul. The words illuminated a truth he had long avoided. Despite all his achievements, he had walked in darkness, separated from an essential light. After the prayer, Ahmad introduced John to other members, who greeted him with kindness and respect. No one asked about his wealth or fame. They asked simple questions. How did you find us? What inspires you? Their genuine curiosity felt like another layer of acceptance. On the drive home, John reflected on the experience. For the first time, he sensed a community bound by faith rather than status. That evening, back in his penthouse, John returned to the Quran book. He opened it to Surah Fussilat, verse 53. "And we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves, until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth." He read the verse several times, savoring each syllable. A single tear slipped down his cheek, not of sorrow, but of recognition. He realized that the signs were not only in distant miracles, but also in the journey of his own heart. A profound sense of belonging. Over the next week, John's routine shifted. He rose each morning before sunrise, compelled by a newfound restlessness that was no longer anxiety but anticipation. Standing on his balcony as the first light crept over Manhattan's towers, he whispered, "Guide me, Lord," and felt a calm resolve settle over his spirit. Instead of rushing into meetings, he opened his Quran translation and read silently. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day are signs for a people who understand. Surah Ali Imran 190. The verse deepened his conviction that every aspect of existence bore evidence of divine design. At lunchtime during his workdays, he found pockets of quiet to study its pages, allowing the words to speak to his heart rather than his intellect. He discovered verses that felt like messages written for him. "And we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth." Surah Fussilat 53. One afternoon, John met Ahmad at a local cafe. This time there was no agenda, just companionship and shared reflection. John spoke of his evolving faith and lingering doubts. Ahmad listened attentively, then quoted, "And if my servants ask you concerning me, then I am near. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls upon me." Surah Al-Baqarah 186. These words resonated so profoundly that John felt tears sting his eyes. He realized the Creator he had been seeking was closer than he had ever imagined, attentive to the whisper of his soul. Determined, John told Ahmad, "I think I'm ready for the next step." 2 days later, dressed simply and with a heart pounding, John returned to the mosque. Ahmad led him to a modest room behind the prayer hall, where the Imam awaited. The Imam greeted him warmly and said, "When you feel in your heart that you believe, recite the testimony of faith." John bowed his head, recalling every verse and every prayer that had brought him to this moment. He lifted his voice and proclaimed, "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and messenger." As the words left his lips, a profound shift occurred inside him. The resistance of doubt dissolved, replaced by a serene certainty. He felt as if a heavy burden of emptiness that had weighed on his chest for years was lifted, and in its place, an enduring peace settled deep within. Tears streamed freely down his cheeks, tears of relief, gratitude, and awe. When John stepped outside the mosque, the world looked different. The morning air was crisp and filled with possibility. he realized that he had discovered the purpose that had long eluded him: to live in remembrance of his Creator and to serve with compassion and humility. He walked with gratitude and a new clarity in every heartfelt step. His faith illuminated every aspect of his life. In the weeks after his heartfelt declaration of faith, John's world continued to buzz with familiar rhythms, yet everything felt profoundly different. Each morning, he rose before dawn's first light, not out of obligation or anxiety, but out of eager anticipation. He performed his ablutions, feeling the water's cool flow wash away remnants of doubt. Then, quietly, he closed his eyes and offered his first prayer, slipping words of gratitude and hope into the stillness. His once frenetic mind now found calm in these simple, consistent rituals. At work, John remained the same visionary leader and innovative founder. Yet his perspective shifted dramatically. Board meetings that once measured success in profit margins and growth projections now included moments of silent reflection or words of encouragement rooted in patience, humility, and compassion. Colleagues noticed the change. Instead of the high-pitched demands for results, his voice carried warmth and understanding, inspiring teams to approach challenges with creativity, integrity, and a sense of shared purpose. His philanthropic initiatives expanded, focusing on education, health, and community development. Guided by the Quranic principle, whoever saves a life is as though he had saved all mankind. Surah Al-Ma'idah 32. Outside the office, John immersed himself in community service. He volunteered regularly at the mosque, serving tea, organizing study circles, and listening empathetically to newcomers. He mentored young entrepreneurs, sharing not only his technical expertise but also the spiritual lessons he had learned: sincerity, perseverance, and the importance of intention. He found profound joy in small acts of kindness: a genuine smile, a comforting word, a willingness to serve without seeking recognition. In his personal life, John rebuilt relationships strained by his previous obsession with success. He reached out to old friends and family members with humility, offering heartfelt apologies where needed, and sharing the peace he had discovered. He invited loved ones to join him for meals, where discussions ranged from philosophy and technology to questions of faith, always fostering an atmosphere of respect and open-minded dialogue. On quiet evenings, John returned to the book that had started it all. He opened his well-worn Quran translation and read passages that resonated afresh, guiding him to deeper reflection. He marveled at the verse, "Allah guides whom He wills to a straight path." Surah Al-An'am 125. He felt gratitude for the journey that had brought him from emptiness to fulfillment, from confusion to clarity, from isolation to connection. Though the world outside remained unchanged, business cycles continued, markets fluctuated, opportunities arose and faded. John discovered that true success lay not in external achievements, but in the condition of his own heart. He had traded the relentless pursuit of fame and fortune for a life defined by remembrance of Allah, service to others, and continuous self-improvement. And so, John Anderson's journey reached a new beginning, a life where each moment, each decision, and each breath carried purpose, guided by faith, and illuminated by peace. In that transformation, he found the lasting fulfillment he had sought but never known amidst the lights of Manhattan. Peace be upon you, and may Allah's mercy and blessings be with you. This is not just a story, it's a lesson, a reflection, a reminder that the truth doesn't always thunder from podiums, but sometimes speaks softly through a child and a simple apple. In the middle of a prestigious global university, where the lecture halls stretched as far as the eyes could see, a grand debate was about to unfold. The seats were packed: professors, students, intellectuals, even media personnel. The air was thick with anticipation. On the grand stage stepped a man whose reputation preceded him: Professor Williams Henderson. Dressed in a sleek black suit, silver hair combed back, and eyes sharp like a hawk, he was not just any academic. He was a legend among atheists. Known for crushing religious debaters with his brutal logic and cold intellect, his presence alone sent a ripple of nervous tension through the room. He approached the podium with practiced confidence. The microphone hissed on, and with a smirk he said, "If any Muslim here believes they can prove that God exists, I challenge you to come forward. But know this, your faith will not survive my logic." Laughter echoed. A few cheers erupted from the professor's supporters, but among the Muslim students, silence reigned. Some lowered their eyes, others looked anxiously at each other. A few held onto their Qurans like lifelines. No one moved. The professor scanned the crowd, amused. "Where are the defenders of your faith now?" he taunted. "Isn't Islam the truth? Come, defend it." A wave of mockery rippled through the audience, and then, quietly, softly, a small voice emerged from the crowd. Light footsteps echoed across the hall. Slowly, a small figure emerged. A boy, perhaps no older than 7, wearing a loose white shirt and a small prayer cap. In his hand he carried a single red apple. Whispers spread through the audience like wildfire. "What is this?" someone chuckled. "Is this a joke?" Others began laughing. Even Professor Henderson shook his head in disbelief and laughed aloud. "You send a child to defend your God?" he scoffed. "Is this the best Islam has to offer?" But the child walked forward, undeterred, calm, graceful. He climbed the stairs to the stage and quietly sat in the chair opposite the professor. The moderator leaned in, confused. "Son, are you sure you want to do this?" The boy looked up and nodded. "My name is Ali Ahmad," he said gently but firmly, "and I want to speak to the professor, because not all truth belongs to adults." The audience fell silent. Even the mocking had stopped. There was something disarming in the child's voice, in his calm eyes, in his smile that was neither arrogant nor afraid. Professor Henderson raised an eyebrow. "Very well, little sir," he said sarcastically, crossing his arms. "Let's see how you defend your God with that apple in your hand." Ali stood up, holding the apple delicately. His voice was soft, but the entire hall could hear him. "This apple," he said, "may be small, but tonight it is the sharpest weapon of truth." The professor leaned forward, smug. "Before we begin, Ali, you haven't studied philosophy, have you?" Ali shook his head. "No, Professor, I haven't studied philosophy, but I learned honesty from my mother and logic from my father. I will only speak from what I know." Soft chuckles rippled through the room, but now more than a few people had their phones out, recording. Something was different about this boy. "All right then," Henderson said with a smirk. "First question. If your God exists, why can't we see him? Why is he invisible? Is he hiding from guilt?" Ali didn't flinch. He simply held up the apple for all to see. "This apple," he said, "has skin, flesh, seeds, and purpose. It's structured, it nourishes. Its design is intentional. And behind design, there is always a designer." Then he turned to the professor and asked, "Professor, do you have a mind?" "Of course," Henderson scoffed. "Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here." "Can I see your mind? Can I touch it? Smell it?" "Don't be ridiculous," the professor snapped. "No, you can't." "But we know you have a mind because of your thoughts, words, and actions," Ali replied. "We see its effects." He paused, then added, "That's how we know God. We don't need to see him. His creation proves his presence." For the first time, Henderson didn't respond immediately. Someone in the front row whispered, "This kid, he's something else." Trying to regain control, the professor leaned forward. "That's a cute answer, but my mind can be tested. Brain scans, chemical reactions. You can measure it. Your God can't be touched, measured. He has no shape or substance." Ali remained calm. "Can you describe love, Professor? Its shape, its color, Its smell? The professor blinked, caught off guard. But it exists, Ali continued, because of its impact. We know it when someone sacrifices, when someone forgives, when hearts change. He looked directly into Henderson's eyes. God is like that. We don't see him, but we see what he does. The sun rises, the stars align, a seed becomes a tree, a drop of blood becomes a human. Is this chaos or a sign? The audience was silent. Phones were held up. Eyes were locked on stage. Next question, the professor said, trying to shift the mood. Is your God everywhere? Yes, Ali answered. He is not limited by time or space. So he has no place, no form, Henderson challenged. Then he's a concept, not a reality. Ali smiled. If someone writes a novel but is not found in its pages, does that mean the author doesn't exist? The professor blinked. God is the author of this universe, Ali continued. Just because we don't see him inside the story doesn't mean he's not real. Henderson looked rattled. His confidence was shaken. Ali sat down again, still holding the apple. The object that everyone had laughed at earlier now seemed to carry weight beyond explanation. And then the professor changed strategy. All right, Ali, let's talk about your prophet. Ali nodded, ready. Your prophet Muhammad couldn't read or write, Henderson said, and yet you claim he brought a perfect book. That's hard to believe. Ali looked up, unwavering. That's the very proof that he didn't write it. The Quran came from a man who couldn't write, yet it contains knowledge of law, morality, history, and science in unmatched linguistic beauty. If he couldn't write, how could he author such a book? The professor shrugged. Maybe someone helped him. Maybe scholars of the time wrote it. Then where are those scholars? Ali asked. Why didn't they ever claim it? Even his enemies said the Quran was unmatched. They called him a magician, not a writer. Henderson's jaw clenched. Ali leaned forward gently. The Quran is not a human effort, it's revelation, and those who read it with a clear heart know it. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Even the professor looked like he was struggling to stay composed. The professor's tone grew sharper, more desperate. But the Quran, he snapped, is filled with verses about hell, fire, punishment. That's not divine wisdom, that's psychological terror. Lee didn't blink. Professor, he said calmly, do you believe in justice? Of course. And what happens when someone breaks the law? Kills, steals, hurts others? They're punished, Henderson replied. They must be. Ali leaned slightly forward, his tiny voice growing clearer. Then why is it wrong for God to warn his creation about consequences? Is it cruelty, or is it mercy? Murmurs rippled through the audience. Laws exist to protect, Ali continued. Punishment deters evil. If there were no consequences, what would stop people from hurting each other? Henderson tried to interrupt, but Ali pressed on, his eyes locked with the professor's. Hell is not a threat for fun. It's a warning, like a traffic sign. It tells you, don't go this way. It's dangerous. Would you say the sign is cruel or helpful? Some students began to clap. The moderator motioned for quiet. The professor tightened his jaw. Then what about your prophet's marriages? Wasn't he just chasing desires? He married so many women. Ali didn't flinch. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, lived 25 years with one wife, Khadijah, in a monogamous marriage. He only married others after her death, mostly widows, women who were abandoned or victims of war. He married for social protection, unity, and to uplift women, not for lust. A hushed "Subhanallah" escaped from a student in the back row. The professor shifted in his seat. He knew the audience was slipping away from him. And the so-called heavenly journey? Isra and Miraj? He said, sarcastic. You expect us to believe that a man flew to the heavens in a night? Sounds like a fairy tale. Ali smiled. Professor, Today, humans send satellites into space. We send rovers to Mars, communicate across continents in seconds. Do you believe God, who created the universe, cannot lift one of his servants through the heavens? He paused. It's not a fairy tale. It's mentioned in the Quran, Surah Al-Isra. Glory be to him who took his servant by night. It says clearly that Allah is the one who made the journey possible, not the Prophet himself. There was no laughter anymore, only a heavy silence, thick with awe and reflection. Professor Henderson stared at the child. Beads of sweat gathered on his forehead. His voice, once booming with arrogance, was now lower, slower. If God is merciful, why not just forgive everyone? Why create hell at all? Ali's answer was quiet but firm. Would you forgive someone who desecrated your parents' graves and spat on their memory? Henderson hesitated. If they were sorry, maybe. Exactly, said Ali. Allah too forgives. In Surah Az-Zumar, verse 53, Allah says, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair of Allah's mercy. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins. But only for those who repent, not for those who die with arrogance. There were tears now, in the crowd, in the eyes of those who had come to mock. Even the moderator was frozen in place. The professor looked down, flipping through his notes, but found nothing. Ali held up the apple again. This apple is a blessing, he said, but it can also become a weapon if thrown at someone. It depends on how we use it. Just like life, just like freedom, just like reason. God gave them all, but we use them to rebel against him. His voice softened to a whisper. Is it wrong if he asks us to be accountable? The professor's lips parted, but no words came out. Ali smiled gently. Hell is not because God lacks mercy. Hell exists because some humans refuse to be saved. The hall was no longer a debate arena. It had become something deeper, a place of silent reckoning. Faces that once mocked were now humbled. Phones recording were held with steady hands, not for amusement, but for remembrance. The little boy with the apple was no longer just a boy. He had become a mirror, showing everyone their doubts, fears, and unasked questions. Professor Henderson, a man who had debated hundreds and written books denying God, now sat speechless across from a 7-year-old. But the battle wasn't over yet. His pride still clung to the last bits of argument. His voice cracked as he spoke again. If God truly loved his creation, why did he give them the ability to sin at all? Why give them freedom only to punish them for using it? Ali responded slowly with measured clarity. Because love without freedom is control, not love. Allah gave humans a mind, a heart, and choice. He honored us with free will, something even angels were not given. But with freedom comes responsibility. He looked gently at the professor. When humans build bombs and destroy cities, they don't blame their hands. They blame the minds and hearts that made the choice. So why blame God for the choices we make? The professor was silent again. The silence now was not just his. It echoed across the hall. Ali continued, and if there was no accountability, if murderers and tyrants died and nothing happened to them, what justice would remain in the world? His words struck something deep. Even those who had come as skeptics now sat upright, listening as if they'd never heard these ideas before. You see hell as a threat, Ali said, but I see it as a boundary, like a fence on a cliff. It doesn't exist to cage you in. It exists to stop you from falling. The professor lowered his head, as if the weight of the words had become too much. Ali leaned back in his chair. Professor, do you know what verse is written at the beginning of nearly every chapter in the Quran? Henderson looked up, defeated. No. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, Ali recited. That's who our God is, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the most compassionate. He held the apple up again and placed it gently on the table between them. But true love includes warning. Like my mother, who loves me dearly but forbids me from playing with fire. And if I still disobey and get burned, can I blame her for warning me too harshly? The professor's shoulders slumped. His breathing grew heavier. It was no longer a debate. It had become an inner struggle between ego and truth. Ali spoke again. God didn't create hell because he wants to punish. He created it because some people choose evil with full knowledge. After being shown signs, sent messengers, revealed books, they still choose arrogance. And God, being just, gives them what they chose. The professor was visibly trembling now. Sweat slid down the side of his face. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. Ali's final words in that moment cut deeper than any argument. Professor, hell is not the absence of God's mercy. It's the final consequence of rejecting that mercy again and again until the door closes. The red apple now sat untouched on the table between them, a simple fruit, yet it carried the weight of a universe of meaning. All eyes were locked on the professor, waiting for his next move, but none came. He looked as though the ground beneath him had shifted. No rebuttal, no mocking smirk, just a man wrestling with himself. Ali Ahmad, the small boy with the clear eyes and steady heart, looked at the professor softly and asked, "May I ask you something now, Professor?" Henderson didn't speak. He simply nodded, barely. Ali continued, "If you were walking in a forest and found a watch lying on the ground, would you believe that it made itself? That it just appeared, perfectly shaped, ticking, with gears and glass and hands, all by itself?" The professor blinked, slowly raising his head. "No," he muttered. "Of course not." "Then," Ali said gently, "how can you believe that this universe, which is far more complex than a watch, stars, galaxies, human minds, language, love, came into existence without a creator?" The air grew dense. A spiritual pressure seemed to fill the room. "This isn't about religion versus science," Ali added. "It's about arrogance versus honesty. You don't have to understand everything to take a first step toward the truth. You only need to be sincere." A tear rolled down Henderson's cheek. It wasn't a tear of defeat. It was something deeper. The collapse of a wall that had stood for decades. Ali looked at him with compassion. "I'm just a child, Professor. I don't have a degree. I don't have a title. But I have something a lot of people forget as they grow older. A heart willing to ask honestly." The professor's hands trembled. He covered his face, his shoulders shaking. "I've spent my life rejecting the light," he whispered, "because I was too proud to admit I could be wrong." Ali stood and took a step forward. He gently placed the apple in front of the professor. "This," he said, "is the apple I brought with me. Just a fruit, but also a witness, because no human being can create even this from nothing. Only Allah can." Henderson stared at it as if he were seeing it for the first time. "You don't need to know everything today," Ali added. "God only asks you to start searching with honesty, not hatred." And that was when Professor Henderson finally broke. 70 years of intellectual pride, decades of public debates, thousands of words written against belief. All of it fell away in silence. The professor stood up, turned slowly toward Ali, and knelt before him. "Forgive me for being arrogant." Ali reached out with his small arms and hugged him. "God is all-forgiving, Professor," he said softly. "No matter how big the sin, His mercy is always bigger, if we return." The hall, once filled with laughter and jeers, was now filled with sobs. Some clapped, but others simply wept. Even the media, those trained to observe without emotion, had lowered their cameras in respect. Ali raised his voice one final time, not in arrogance, but as a reminder. In the Quran, Surah Az-Zumar, verse 53, Allah says, Say, O my servants who have wronged their own souls, do not despair of Allah's mercy. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins." The professor lowered his head to the ground, and there, for the first time in his life, he prostrated, not in defeat, but in awakening. That night, the world didn't witness a child winning a debate. It witnessed a human soul returning to its creator. Ali did not stay for applause. He quietly picked up his school bag, waved goodbye, and left the stage. No medals, no fame, just peace. He walked home, back to his mother, back to his kite-flying afternoons, back to a life simple and pure. But deep in his heart, he knew, tonight, he had helped guide a man back to God. And maybe, just maybe, that's more valuable than all the awards in the world. Because sometimes all it takes to shatter a lifetime of doubt is a little faith and a red apple. The morning sun had just begun to warm the ancient city of Cordoba, Italy. Its streets bustled quietly with life as the townspeople made their way to the grand old church that had stood for centuries. Inside, the air was thick with the solemn notes of hymns and whispered prayers. The congregation, dressed in their Sunday best, filled the pews, expectant, pious, and entirely unsuspecting of the storm about to unfold. At the front, an elderly nun in a pristine white robe stood ready to deliver her morning sermon. Her eyes, cold and sharp, swept across the faces of those before her. But instead of opening a Bible, the nun reached into her bag and drew out a copy of the Quran. The congregation gasped, a few exchanged uncertain glances, but most watched with curiosity as she raised the holy book high. Without hesitation, she began to tear out its pages one by one, declaring in a loud, commanding voice, "This is a book of lies, a religion of violence." Laughter erupted. Applause thundered around the sanctuary as some members cheered her on, intoxicated by her boldness. Outside the church, a young Muslim woman named Maryam walked the cobbled path, her wide headscarf fluttering softly in the morning breeze. She was new to the city, on her way to a dental appointment, but even in this Catholic stronghold she wore her faith with pride and calm dignity. As she neared the church, the noise from inside caught her attention. Cheers, applause, something unusual. Curiosity drew her closer, and what she saw through the open doors shattered her heart. The Quran, her holy book, being torn and ridiculed in front of dozens. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Maryam fought to remain composed. She wanted to run away, to escape the painful sight, but a voice inside urged her, "You must do something." Gathering her courage, she walked through the church doors. The congregation's laughter faded into uneasy silence as Maryam's figure appeared in the doorway, confident but visibly hurt. The nun, still clutching torn pages, looked at Maryam expectantly, almost as if provoking an angry outburst. Instead, Maryam simply asked, "Why did you do this?" Her voice was steady, soft, but unyielding. The congregation watched, tension thickening in the air. The nun smirked and challenged Maryam. "If your faith is true, answer my 5 questions. If not, admit that your belief is fragile." The crowd, sensing drama, began recording on their phones, convinced their nun would quickly defeat the foreigner. Maryam paused, then nodded with quiet dignity. "I will try, but let's speak with respect." The debate was about to begin. A lone Muslim woman standing firm before a hostile crowd, her only weapons, faith, knowledge, and composure. A hush settled over the ancient church as the nun fixed Maryam with a cold, skeptical gaze. "If your faith is true, answer my 5 questions," she repeated, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "If not, admit your belief is fragile." Around them, phones were raised, cameras flashing, eager to record the foreign woman's humiliation. But Maryam stood still, drawing strength from her heart and her upbringing. The first question rang out. "Does God have a son?" "We believe Jesus is the Son of God. How do you explain that?" Miriam's face was calm, her words deliberate. God is almighty. He is not born, nor does he give birth. We believe in his absolute oneness. There is nothing like him. This is not only faith, but logic. If God needed a child, he would need a partner, and if he needs anything, he is not perfect. But God is perfect, self-sufficient, the creator of all. The congregation stilled, some shifting uneasily. The nun's eyes narrowed, but she moved on. Her next challenge, the Prophet Muhammad, didn't he doubt himself and even lie? Miriam shook her head gently. Prophets are human beings. They experience fear, anxiety, even doubt before revelation. But once chosen by God, they speak only the truth. Prophet Muhammad never lied after becoming a prophet. His entire life is a testimony to his honesty. If he were a liar, his message would have died with him. Yet today, his teachings live on, inspiring millions, not by force, but by example. A ripple of whispers moved through the pews. The nun leaned forward, trying to unsettle her further. Why do women in Islam receive half the inheritance of men? Is that not unfair? Miriam replied gently. In Islam, men are required to financially provide for women, for their wives, daughters, mothers, and sisters. The larger share they receive is not a privilege, but a responsibility. Women's share is their own to keep, with no obligation to spend it on anyone else. The system is just, not equal in number, but equally fair in role and responsibility. The congregation quieted further, some beginning to reconsider long-held assumptions. The nun persisted, raising her voice. If God is merciful, why did he create eternal hell? Doesn't that go against mercy? Miriam answered, her voice unwavering. God's mercy is vast, but he is also just. Hell is not for those who make mistakes, but for those who reject truth knowingly, who choose to harm others, who refuse every opportunity to change. Mercy is for those who seek it. Justice is for those who deny it. God gives everyone a choice. Their destiny is a result of those choices. For the first time, the nun seemed rattled. She hesitated, searching for her final blow. And why does jihad in Islam always mean the sword? Why is your religion linked to violence? Miriam met her gaze. Jihad means struggle against ignorance, injustice, and one's own ego. It is not just war. True jihad is the effort to be a better person, to seek knowledge, to serve others. Physical battle is only allowed in defense, and even then, with rules to protect innocents. Most mentions of jihad in the Quran are about self-improvement and patience, not war. The church grew silent, some people bowing their heads in thought. The nun, feeling her authority slipping, clenched her fists. She was not prepared for this young woman's calm, reasoned defense of her faith. The debate had taken a turn no one in the church had anticipated. Instead of being shamed or silenced, Miriam stood like a beacon of composure and wisdom, answering each question not with anger, but with clarity and humility. The congregation, who had moments ago cheered the nun's insults, now sat in uneasy silence, some with tears glistening in their eyes. The nun's frustration boiled over. Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and desperation. Enough! You think you're wise, but you know nothing, she snapped. Before anyone could intervene, she stepped forward and, in a moment of uncontrollable rage, grabbed Miriam by the neck, her hands tightening around the young woman's throat. Gasps and screams echoed through the pews. Some people tried to break it up, but most were too stunned to react quickly. Miriam, shocked, did not fight back. Her eyes met the nun's, not with fear or hatred, but with pity. After what felt like an eternity, the nun released her grip, and Miriam collapsed to the cold stone floor, clutching her sore neck, struggling to breathe. So sound. But even in pain, Miriam refused to respond with bitterness. Slowly, shakily, she rose to her feet. The congregation was mesmerized, as if witnessing a miracle. Miriam fixed her gaze on the nun and spoke, her voice raspy but calm. "Sister, let me ask you 3 questions, not to insult you, but to help us seek the truth together." The nun stared back, breathing heavily, her pride wounded but curiosity piqued. Around them, the crowd grew still, sensing the significance of what was about to happen. Miriam's first question pierced the silence. "Who created Jesus?" The words seemed to echo through the ancient church. The nun tried to answer, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came. After a long pause, she stammered, "We believe Jesus is the Son of God, born of the Holy Spirit." Miriam nodded gently. "If Jesus is created, he cannot be God. The Creator is never created. God is beyond birth and death." The congregation, moved by the simplicity and logic of her answer, fell silent. Miriam continued, "If Jesus died for the sins of humanity, why does sin still exist? Why are innocent children still born with sin if redemption has already been paid?" The nun faltered, her confidence crumbling. Tears began to form in her eyes. The church grew more emotional, with many people openly weeping. "And lastly," Miriam said, her voice soft but unyielding, "how can you be sure that the gospel you hold is the original, unchanged Word of God? There are many versions, many interpretations. How do you know which one is true?" The nun stared at her book, memories of theological debates and doubts flashing across her face. She whispered, "We believe the truth remains in it, but—" Her voice trailed off, lost in uncertainty. Miriam concluded, "Belief is beautiful when it's based on facts. In Islam, we are taught to seek truth, to verify, to question. The Quran remains unchanged since its revelation, not a single letter altered." The atmosphere in the church was now transformed. Where there had been arrogance, now there was humility. Where there was mockery, now only awe. The old nun stood frozen, her stern authority shattered, tears running down her weathered face. Around her, members of the congregation, who had once cheered for humiliation, now wept quietly, some bowing their heads, others covering their faces with their hands. The church, once a place of hostility and accusation, became a sanctuary of silent contemplation and raw emotion. The nun finally found her voice, but it was trembling, broken. I apologize," she whispered, barely above a breath. "I don't know anymore. I don't understand." Her pride, built over decades of unquestioned faith and religious certainty, melted away in the face of Miriam's gentle but unyielding questions. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, and raised her hands as if seeking forgiveness. From Miriam, from the congregation, from God himself. Miriam approached, her own eyes brimming with tears, and knelt beside the nun. She reached out and gently took the old woman's hands in her own. "Sister," she said softly, "it's okay. Allah is most merciful. He never turns away a heart that sincerely seeks the truth or wishes to return to Him." The old nun nodded, her shoulders shaking with emotion. At that moment, the walls between them, of age, tradition, faith, and culture, fell away, replaced by something pure and universal: humility before the truth and the Creator. The congregation watched in awe as a bond of compassion formed between the two women, both changed forever by the honesty and respect of their encounter. From the back of the church, an old priest, whose faith had weathered years of theological debate, wiped tears from his cheeks, a small smile spreading across his face. He realized he had witnessed not defeat, but the victory of sincere, humble dialogue over arrogance and ignorance. As the atmosphere softened, Miriam gently helped the nun to her feet. The crowd, witnessing this act of forgiveness and unity, began to stir. Some people hugged, others prayed silently, while a few approached Miriam to thank her for opening their eyes and hearts. In that ancient church, under the blue Cordoban sky, something miraculous had happened. Hatred had turned to humility, arrogance to understanding, and hostility to hope. The congregation that once mocked and jeered now gathered around Miriam and the old nun, eager to ask questions and learn about a faith they had previously scorned. With trembling hands and a new light in her eyes, the nun looked at Miriam and spoke, "I want to know more about Islam. I want to learn the truth." Miriam smiled, tears streaming down her face. "I will help you. We will learn together." Soft applause rose among the congregation, mingled with prayers and gentle weeping. For many, the moment was overwhelming, a spiritual awakening they never expected. Some confessed that they, too, had long held doubts, but were too afraid to ask. Now, inspired by Miriam's courage and the nun's humility, they felt free to seek answers, to question, and to begin their own journey toward understanding. From that day forward, the church was no longer just a symbol of one tradition, but of dialogue and transformation. The story of Miriam and the nun spread throughout the city, inspiring both Muslims and Christians to talk to one another, not with anger or arrogance, but with humility, knowledge, and sincere hearts. And so, under the cloudless Cordoban sky, a new chapter began, not just for Miriam and the nun, but for everyone present that day. It was a chapter written not with the ink of conflict, but with the light of truth, compassion, and the endless possibility of faith rediscovered.